Okay, so today's talk is going to be about the invocation of the Bornless One, which is a crucial ritual in ceremonial magic in general, and in Thelema in particular. So I'm going to go into a little bit about the history and whatnot, and a little bit about some practical stuff of actually like doing this ritual and working this ritual. Sort of how it became famous was when Aleister Crowley did his edition of the Goetia. He added it as a preliminary invocation and something that you should do before you actually do the traditional Goetia. So the traditional Goetic working doesn't necessarily have a lot of ritual involved with it. It's really just you say the conjurations over and over, you make the circle and the triangle the way it says in the book, and then you expect the spirit to show up. It's sort of why they have a lot of conjurations that you're supposed to repeat, because it's like a lengthy thing. But it doesn't necessarily involve like getting up, moving around the room, drawing stuff in the air. Like that all came later on in the Golden Dawn sort of reinterpretation of that. Same with the Bornless Ritual itself. I mean, if you look at Crowley's version, he essentially combines it with the pentagram ritual, as you see in the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, where you get up around, you do particular god signs, and you draw particular figures in the air. That's not really in the original sort of text of the ritual, which brings me to the sort of the first thing I want to address, because if you sort of get into this and you start looking it up, the first thing you'll find usually is people critiquing Crowley's edition of it and saying like, okay, well, historically speaking, there's a more accurate version, or there's other more accurate translations and whatnot. So just to get this right out of the way, the reason that Crowley says that it's such a good ritual essentially is that he says, this is how I, this chair's, yeah.
Yeah, make yourself comfortable.
Make yourself at home. Yeah. The reason that he says that we should be doing this ritual and pay attention to this ritual, and it's really important, is the success that he had. And this is indisputable. Like, you'll find many authors who will say, oh, well, Crowley got this word wrong, or this, like, version of the translation wrong, or this isn't the most accurate way of depicting it, whatever. He used this ritual to contact his holy guardian angel, who was IVxx, which gave him the Book of the Law, and essentially started Thelema as its own belief system / system of practice, however we want to define it. And the people who are critiquing him have not had those results. They have not produced these things. So we can argue till the cows come home about what the most historically accurate representation of it is, but the people who are saying that Crowley didn't know what he was doing are not producing things like he was producing. So that, right, in and of itself, it is an indisputable point. Crowley, in his AA books, essentially he numbers them all and like puts them all in a particular order. And this book he puts with Samek, which is the path in between Hesad, which is the first one up from Malkuth, and Tippereth, where you meet your holy guardian angel. So it is the path to the angel in the way he puts it. And this is specifically, he didn't just use this for the Goetia, he used this to contact his own holy guardian angel and to strengthen his relationship even after the first communication. And he did it a number of different ways, and he describes this in his confessions. We'll get into that in a second. But so the question is then why? Like, why would he attach this both to the Goetia, which he places with Malkuth in terms of like it's a physical book. You're summoning a spirit who's going to show up in front of you, physically appear to you, and do stuff for you in the physical world. Like it's a system that has a concrete result. You do it because you want something, and you either get the thing or you don't get the thing. And if you don't get the thing, then it doesn't work. If you do get the thing, it does. It's very easy to test. It's not like, and I'm not saying that that necessarily makes it superior to other forms of magic, but it does make it measurable, comparable to other forms of magic, where you can do workings for knowledge or enlightenment and so on and so forth, and there can be a certain amount of debate as to whether you actually got the knowledge or the enlightenment. It's kind of hard to judge unless you have very concrete sort of goals, and the Goetia sort of supports that. But also, the reason that Crowley attaches this to the HGA working is just because it is a very general kind of like, I'm hoping that everyone is at least vaguely familiar with the text of the ritual at this point. If you're here, then probably. So it's about asserting yourself essentially over the entire phenomenal universe. And it's all-encompassing. It involves every element. And the repeated rubric at the end, every power upon the earth and under the earth and blah, blah, blah. It's very much a spiritual assertion over all created things. I am now in a position of authority, which is why that he thought it was a good preliminary to the Goetia, because at this point he feels like once you do this, you're done, and you have this certain amount of spiritual authority that you can wield over these spirits and effectively command them to appear. And he used that actually to replace the sort of more traditional, slightly post-Enlightenment version of this, which would be where you would call on particular angels who were in command of this sphere that the demon was in control of, and then you want the angel is specifically above the demon, and then you want the king of that demon in specific to get him, and it's sort of a very hierarchical, graduated system, which Crowley kind of replaced all that with the invocation of the Bornless One, just to be like, yes, I am now in charge of the universe, so I get to tell you what to do, basically. Now, because of this, unlike a lot of the Thelemic rituals, where it's very... I very rarely condone people messing around with them or inventing their own versions or blah, 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 whatever. Like, they were made by people who've been doing this for a long time for a specific reason. So, like, interchanging things, trying to make them personal, well, it seems like a good idea at first, but the reality is that that's not really a good idea until you've kind of been doing this stuff long enough to really have the experience and the knowledge to make those kind of changes and make those distinctions. With the Bornless invocation, there's a little more flexibility. The barbarous words themselves are what they are, but there's a few titles and a few references which we can argue about how they get transliterated from Greek, you know, like there could be maybe a transliteration that works more for you, so it's a little more personalizable than a lot of the rituals that Crowley uses, and a lot of the ones that he emphasizes. So there's a certain amount of flexibility there, basically. There's a few things that Crowley says about it when he describes it, and one of the main ones that I want to emphasize in particular, and we're skipping to the practical bit, but we need that right out of the way, is that the ritual is supposed to be done in the body of light at the same time as you do it in your physical body. This kind of makes it unique. He doesn't say that about anything else. So there's a certain amount of astral work that you need to have done in the beginning before it's even possible to correctly do this ritual. And you sort of do the rising in the planes exercise that we see on Libero and traveling in the astral sight and whatever. Crowley, for his own part, did the ritual for a long time when he was in China, just like on the back, on like horseback or muleback or whatever it was, just concentrating and doing it in his head, in his body of light, doing all the gestures and doing all the signs and so on, and carrying it out like that. And that's an important distinction to make, because pretty much the rest of these rituals, there are versions that are kind of the like low tempo version. Like he has like the pentagram rituals that you do with the dagger and the wand or whatever, but he also has versions that you can just do with your hands, and you can do in a confined space and so on and so forth. This is one of those which is kind of like really emphasizes that aspect. It's interesting to look at the way this evolves, because this ritual, there's some debate about how old it is, how far back it goes. The reality is, anyone who tells you they know how old it is or how far back it goes is lying, because there's no way to like make that judgment. There's early versions of it that go back as far as the 1600s, but no one knows how, like, where the original text would have come from. It could have been like a couple years before that, or it could have been like a long time before that. We really have no idea. Crowley himself is the reason that we put so much emphasis on this is because he emphasizes it a lot, and he is arguably the greatest magician that we have to deal with. I mean, we can have that discussion about who has the most success or whatever, but no one really has the output Crowley did. The only one who could really compare with him would be John Dee, and they have a lot of similar characteristics in their career. Like, they both happen at really like times of upheaval, political upheaval, times where their impact is really going to be felt. I mean, John Dee came right after the Anglican Church sort of was created, so now you had a break from Catholicism in Western Christianity. Crowley came on the cusp of 2 world wars that were going to change the face of Western civilization completely, like the world in general, but particularly Western civilization. The fact that he's using that is significant for that reason. To go briefly into the sort of philosophical underpinnings, there's a connection between the Bornless ritual, the concept of bornless, all right, or headless is literally, I think, what it comes to, but the idea that the head is the beginning is implicit in the etymology of it. There's one part in Eliphas Levi's Doctrine and Ritual of Transcendental Magic where he is talking about Baphomet, the sort of figure that we're probably all familiar with, of like man and beast and male and female and light and dark all combined into one sort of image. And he calls this the god of Plato and Spinoza. This is pretty significant. Plato is obvious in terms of his philosophy of forms, the idea that ideas have this sort of eternal, unchanging existence that happens outside of our real existence. For example, like you'd have the idea of a table, and like that table has a form, which is the perfect, infinite, ultimate table, and all physical tables are just representations of that, essentially. Where it and we can kind of see that come a little bit into the whole Bornless thing, the idea that this is what we are invoking is something that precedes all phenomenal existence. What's really even more significant is when we look at Spinoza. He's an interesting philosopher in the sense that pretty much everyone has a great deal of respect for him. I think he's the only philosopher I've ever seen Nietzsche speak kindly of, or at least not insult directly. Look, we're talking about like one of the most supremely critical guys in the history of philosophy, and he still has good things to say about Spinoza.